Welcome, everybody, to the Inner Carnivore Podcast, Season 2, Episode 5. My guest today, one of the most influential carnivore advocates out there. He is a board-certified family physician with over 20 years of experience. He's the author of the book, Lies My Doctor Told Me. And most people who follow me and listen to the show should be very familiar with my next guest, Dr. Ken Berry. If you guys are interested in supporting the show, it's very quick, easy, free. Like the show, review the show, rate it, leave a comment, send it to your friends. It helps immensely, and I appreciate it every single time you guys do that. Enjoy the show. Welcome, everybody, to the show. My guest today, Dr. Ken Berry. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great, JT. Good to be with you.
I really appreciate you coming on. As we were talking a little bit before, I've had the pleasure of interviewing a lot of people with a lot of educational background. And the first thing I always ask, especially MDs, is, so you go through all of this schooling, right? You get your bachelor's, you go through medical school, you do your residency, you're doing all these clinicals, and you come out of, as an MD, and everybody seems to have the same view on nutrition. Like literally almost everybody I've talked to has been like, oh, this is what it is, right? This is the established science. So when you come out of medical school and you start your practice, what was your views on nutrition?
The first few years of my medical practice, I was the guy who, if you came in and you were type 2 diabetic or you were obese, I would tell you to join Weight Watchers and join the gym. Literally, that was my advice. I said that hundreds of times. And that would have been my nutrition advice for my entire career, except for the fact that about 3 years in, I got severely obese and pre-diabetic myself. And so I basically put my own advice into practice with myself. And so I started jogging, which I absolutely hated. And I cut out all the saturated fat, the bacon, the animal fat. I started drinking lots of fruit juice smoothies. I started eating whole grain bread, lots of fruits and vegetables. And it not only did it not help, but I gained 3 more pounds and my A1C got worse. And so it was at that moment that it occurred to me, perhaps all of my patients I've been giving that advice to, who I secretly suspected were just laying on the couch eating jelly donuts and not listening to me, maybe they had been following my advice, and maybe my advice was just worthless. And so based on that hypothesis, maybe you've been just running your mouth and not helping anybody. I started looking into nutrition, and so quickly I looked over my old medical school nutrition notes, and they were really good. I actually had a nutrition class, unlike many doctors, but it was about how to feed people intravenously if they had been in a house fire and had 3rd-degree burns, or had been in a 18-car pileup and broken all their facial bones. We had to feed them through an IV needle. I was good at that, but when it came to the care and feeding of humans out in the wild, so to speak, I didn't get really any training. The only training I remember about that, our professor was from New Zealand, and he was a type 1 diabetic, and he was always telling us how he only ate whole wheat pasta. He said it kind of funny because he was from New Zealand, and I remember that. So I was like, okay, I guess whole wheat, that must make some kind of big difference. And I'd love to be able to go back in time now and ask him, how many units of regular do you have to inject after your whole wheat pasta? Because I guarantee you it was a whole syringe full. And so I was completely uneducated when it came to the care and feeding of humans in the wild.
And that seems to be the common consensus, right? Like people leave with their nutritional education, which isn't a whole lot. Like I've now talked to numerous doctors who are like, yeah, we didn't really, most people think it's settled science. And it takes a personal experience in order for you to realize that. Yeah.
And it could be settled science, JT, and it should be settled science at this point. But several things happened to medicine, which then had kind of watershed effects on nutrition. When back in the early before 1920, there was a guy named Flexner who did a report for a guy named Rockefeller. And then they basically decided that, you know what, medicine needs to be basically prescribing pharmaceuticals that are derived from petroleum products effectively. And I know for many of your listeners, they're probably like, wow, that sounds conspiratorial. But all you have to do is do a little internet search and you'll find the Flexner report and you'll find all the history that goes into that. And then, so based on that, all of the natural doctors, which I'm not a big fan of naturopathic medicine. If you look into it, there's not much there either. But at least people were trying to use the ancestral wisdom that had come down from hundreds of generations. If you have this, then you need to use this. And we're like, no. And so then when science really took off in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and we started, coming up with vaccines and coming up with all these patent medicines, basically a synthetic molecule you can get a patent on and then make a lot of money. Nobody wanted to talk about any herbs or any tree barks or any of that. Nobody wanted to talk about that. If you even tried to bring that up, you were just a kook or a quack. And so that basically hijacked the entire paradigm of medicine, the way you think about it. It's like, well, if you're sick, you need a pharmaceutical. If there's something wrong with you, there's a pharmaceutical you need. And so that became the paradigm, the only really mainstream accepted paradigm in medicine. And so if you even talk too much about nutrition, you were not part of the program. You were kind of weird or out there, or you were a tree hugger, you were crunchy, you were something. You were anything except for mainstream accepted medicine. And it's only now, and I think really now after the COVID debacle, that now if a doctor talks about nutrition with regards to, hey, if you eat this, you can improve your health, it's being accepted much more than it really ever has been in the last 100 years, really. And I think that's a very good thing. I think most patients they realize that they've been lied to about several things. And a great thing about human nature is when you find out that someone's been lying to you about something, it's human nature for the next question to be, I wonder what else they were lying about. Lots of ex-spouses, they're like, oh, he's lying to me about this. Oh, she's lying to me about this. I wonder what else they're lying about. Then you start looking at the bank records and the phone records, and then now they're your ex. And I think that same exact paradigm happened with patients when they found out, wow, they were lying about the masks. Wow, they were lying about the 6-foot thing. Wow, they were lying about if you get this injection, then you are protected. You cannot. It's like, wow, okay. Wonder what else they were lying about. And I think that's a fail-safe in human nature. Anytime we're misled by something, we're more suspicious of that thing in the future, as we should be. And I love it that so many patients now, and in fact doctors as well, are open. Like, well, maybe let's look at nutrition with fresh eyes. And so I think we're potentially at a renaissance in medicine where, of course, we're not going to start believing that, oh, you need stump water for this and goose grease for that. But at the same time, if somebody comes up and says, I've got hundreds of thousands of people eating a carnivore diet. And out of those hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands have reverse type 2 diabetes. That's a huge signal, JT. I think doctors now and dietitians and nutritionists are more open to go, wait, you're telling me tens of thousands of people have reverse type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, obesity, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, even psoriasis, eczema, even Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. Yes, these are real people. You can go and you can watch their story. I think now there's a degree of openness for many doctors and many dietitians, not all, of course, that they're open. Like, okay, well, let me look into this. And indeed, many doctors and dietitians have tried carnivore, and they're like, holy crap! Not only did it help me lose weight or whatever the main thing that they went into it for, but it also helped this and this and this, which I wasn't expecting. And it's almost as if a carnivore diet is part of a proper human diet.
I completely agree. And I'm glad you said that about, once you realize one lie, because I actually said that, prior to really diving into carnivore. I said, yeah, there's probably stuff they're lying to us about, but I don't want to go down that hole. Like, as soon as I realize that there's one thing they're lying to us about, okay, well, what else are they lying to us about? And I think you hit it on the head with COVID, where we realized, because it used to be, this is why I love talking to doctors, right? I'm not a doctor, but the first thing everybody says is, well, are you a doctor? As if that is the pinnacle. And as soon as I'm a doctor, what I say is true, unless you don't agree with me. And then what you say is not true. Confirmation bias. But we realized that all of these doctors were giving us information that either was blatantly false or was incorrect. And then we started going down diet. And I think the super unique thing is, every condition you've met, I've talked to someone personally who has overcome that. Like literally every single one. The reason I started the podcast, I was like, I don't think enough people understand the levels with which people are overcoming these things. And then you start going into these specialties of doctors. Like, I've talked to Dr. Lisa Wiedemann, an optometrist, who explains how carnivore helps in her practice. And you're like, diet and eyes? And then I just talked to Dr. Georgia Eid, psychiatry. You're like, wait a minute, diet and so it's crazy that all of these people from independent professions with independent specialties are all kind of arriving at the same thing, that, hey, eating this way may actually help in almost all of these scenarios.
Absolutely. And let me be a little more clear. When I use the word lie, I wrote a book called Lies My Doctor Told Me, and I explain in detail what I mean by the word lie. So if the young teenage boy who sacks up your groceries at the supermarket, if he says, hey, you should eat a carnivore diet, well, he's just the grocery sacker. He doesn't know anything about anything, right? So you take his advice, his nutrition advice or his medical advice, you take that at your own peril. But a doctor, a dietitian, a nutritionist, a PhD researcher, it's okay if the bag boy is just repeating something he heard on CNN or that he read in Time Magazine. That's okay, because he's not a professional. He's not putting himself out there as an authority on human health and human nutrition. And even though most doctors don't put themselves out there as, hey, I'm an expert on human nutrition, I think that's implied. Most patients will be like, well, I mean, he knows all about the human body. How could he not know what you should feed your human body, right? I think that's just an implied understanding that most patients, if you ask them, they'd be like, well, yeah, he surely knows about human nutrition. So doctors and dietitians and nutritionists and other people who have licenses or who have taken an oath, it's their duty to know or to say, I don't know. This is what I do, but I have no idea. That's your duty. If you have a fiduciary relationship to a patient or a client, you don't get to just spout off some bullshit that you saw on the news last night. You don't get to do that. You either say, I've studied this in detail and this is what I see happening. This is the signal I see back from patients and clients. Or you have a duty to say, I don't know a damn thing about diet. Just whatever you want to do, find somebody else. I'm not your guy. If I'm a neurosurgeon, don't ask me about diet. Okay, that's honest. Be honest. Say you don't know. Say you haven't looked into diet at all. But don't just say, well, I read this in Scientific American, so I'm sure this is fine. I'll just give everybody this advice. That's not okay if you have a license. That's not okay if you've taken an oath. You don't get to do that. That's what, in my opinion, makes it a lie. If you get nutrition advice or medical advice from somebody whose duty and job it is to know better and they don't know better, that makes it a big fat lie in my book. I don't think all doctors and dietitians are in on this humongous evil conspiracy. Not at all. I think they're all just trying to do the best they can. I think they're all pretty good people. But they have a duty. They've got to step up. So if you ask your dietitian about what kind of oil you should put in your car, what do you think the average dietitian would say? I don't know. I'm a dietitian. I don't know. Ask your mechanic. That's what doctors should be saying when somebody asks them about nutrition. If they truly haven't looked into it, and this also goes for a lot of dietitians too, unfortunately, they should say, I don't know. You better ask somebody who's really looked into it and studied it, because honestly, I don't have a damn clue.
Do you think that is a byproduct of our current healthcare educational system that basically tells people, especially dietitians, like I run into dietitians, oh my gosh, I could literally make my entire account a parody on dietitians.
Yep.
That tell dietitians, you are the authority. You are the highest trained, the most qualified, like the buck stops with you. You know it all.
Absolutely. And they're actually trained that way by their mentors and by their professors. I can remember dietitians literally telling my patients back, but when I was saying join Weight Watchers and join the gym, they would be like, oh, don't listen to your doctor about nutrition. If you want nutrition advice, you ask an expert, and that's a dietitian. And I remember being a little offended by that as a doctor at the time, but then I was like, also, I don't have time to talk about nutrition for 30 minutes. So it's fine. Go see the dietitian. That's fine with me. But I think nutritionists and dietitians, they should look into who funded their school of dietetics. I think they should look into who paid for your textbook, who paid for all the studies that are in your textbook. And most of them don't know. Most dietitians are well-meaning, good, ethical people. They just don't know better. And when they hear a doctor, a family doctor from Tennessee with a little bit of an accent coming out and saying, oh, you should just eat lots of meat, that's going to help everything you got, that's offensive to them. They're like, first of all, you're not a dietitian. Second of all, you're a family doctor. It's not like you're an endocrinologist or a neurologist or something. You're just a family doctor. And it's like, okay, but let's talk about research. Let's talk about education. And that's when you get blocked, as you know. You and I are buddies on X, and that's when you start saying, okay, well, I'll bring my studies, you bring yours. And then that's when you get blocked or ghosted and you don't hear from them anymore. And so arrogant ignorance is a concept that many doctors and dietitians suffer from. They've got the arrogance of their position of authority, but they have not done their due diligence, and so they suffer from ignorance. And the most dangerous form of ignorance is arrogant ignorance. Your grocery sacker boy, he'll just tell you, hell, I don't know. I sack groceries for a living. I don't know. Why are you even asking me? But if somebody comes across as arrogantly knowledgeable when in fact they're ignorant, that's very dangerous. It's very deceptive. And, then you have patients joining up to fight the diet wars because they really believe in this nutritionist that they saw on Instagram or on X or that they met in real life. And they're like, no, you're crazy. Red meat is inflammatory and bad for you. I know this. How do you know that? Well, my dietitian told me. Well, why does your dietitian, and then there's this whole huge discussion that has to be had because many people, when you first approach them about nutrition, they're not ready to hear it. And that's why I started my YouTube channel, was because many of my patients, they weren't ready to hear about low carb, keto, ketovore, carnivore. And I thought, well, and I would have a patient who would come back a year later and say, you know what, doc, when you first told me to eat mostly meat, I thought you were nuts. I went to another doctor. But then I saw your YouTube video on it and I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a try. And man, it worked good. So I'm coming back. You're my doctor again. That's what would happen back in 2004, 2005, and 6 when I was very early in recommending this stuff. And my wife, Nisha, said, make a YouTube channel, make the video, and then forget about it. It'll save you time in the clinic. But also, if they're not ready to hear it, because that's very, very important. People who try, if they're preaching religion, they're preaching nutrition, they're preaching medicine, they're preaching anything, there's a certain percentage of people who are not ready for the message, and that's totally fine. If I've got that evergreen YouTube video out there, then whenever they are ready, they can search it out, and then we can have a conversation.
Absolutely. And to put into perspective the arrogance that you were talking about, and I know you're a big fan of him, one of my favorite people on social media and somebody that I've talked to quite a bit, one of the most educated people on the face of the earth, Nick Norwitz.
Yeah.
His slogan is stay curious, right? Like he just got it
tattooed on his arm.
Did he get that tattooed? Oh my goodness. So I have so many good stories about Nick, and I'll just share one. So for anybody who doesn't know, Nick is finishing up medical school at Harvard. He has a PhD in metabolism from Oxford. He was a valedictorian at Dartmouth in cell biology, I believe. And so Nick is very nice on social media, right? Very nice, very polite, very well-mannered. He would actually sometimes make memes or responses and then send them to me and be like, hey, I can't actually post this, but I think this is good material. And I loved it because that's the benefit of me. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a licensed anything. I can post whatever the heck I want. But back to the arrogance, you have these people who are like, I got my degree, got my PhD, that's all I need to know. And now I'm going to spend my entire life just regurgitating what I learned in a textbook. Cool. I've seen most of those textbooks too, right? I can regurgitate a textbook. That doesn't mean anything because you're acting like this is a settled science and here's a question I have for you is how can we so let's take PhD of nutrition. That's my favorite discipline. And I can find a PhD that thinks vegan is the only way to eat. And I can find a PhD that thinks balanced is the only way. But if I find a PhD that thinks carnivore, which I can, that person is now ostracized and they're criminal. Why can we have nuance in some, but not in other?
Yeah. Well, there's this concept known as Overton's window. And currently it's completely socially acceptable to tell someone to eat the rainbow or to eat all things in moderation or to eat a plant-based diet or even to eat a vegan diet. All those things are socially permissible, as in if you're at a cocktail party with 50 relatively educated, relatively, upper middle class people, and you say, well, you should eat a plant-based diet. That's the healthiest way to eat. Nobody's going to drop their drink. Nobody's going to gasp in horror that you just said that. Well, a carnivore diet, a meat-centric diet, a meat-heavy diet, a zero-carb diet, if you just imagine at that cocktail party, if I said, well, actually, a meat-based diet is the healthiest diet for human beings, there would be people that gasp in disbelief. There'd be people who moved away from me, who would get up and change their seat. And so we have to shift, and I think this is happening. I think you can see on X that the vegan diet is losing steam very, very quickly. I follow all the big vegan accounts just so when they tweet something that's just egregiously dangerous and harmful, I'll retweet them and comment on it, or I'll comment on their site. And like one is Veg News, big vegan account, and I've got notifications turned on for them because they'll just put out stuff as Bible. This is true. And it's like, dude, that is not even close to true. And also, like, people can harm themselves if they listen to you. And I'll see that they posted something 45 minutes ago, and it'll have one heart, no comments, no retweets. And that didn't used to be that way. And so I think that many, many people are becoming aware, thanks to your work and other people in the space, a vegan diet. If you're going to eat a vegan diet, you better take a handful of supplements every single day. And you probably ought to sneak around when nobody's looking and eat some egg yolks and some salmon or some cod liver or something too, because you're going to cause long-term health problems. So I think the carnivore diet is just now slipping in to Overton's window where it's okay. And you might actually find 2 or 3 people at the cocktail party who are like, yeah, I'm on carnivore. But even 5 years ago, that was not the case. And I've actually been a big fan of the carnivore diet for years. But I knew when I was first starting the YouTube channel, that would not go over. Whereas low carb and keto, yeah, people will be like, well, that's still weird and faddish and sciencey, but okay, I'm not going to spill my drink because you said, eat a high-fat, low-carb diet. But now I think carnivore is moving into where you can have that discussion in public and people are not going to just immediately run for the doors. And I think and you know what I know about a carnivore diet. You know the power of it. And so I think that's the beginning of the end for the plant-based people and for the vegans, because once people start to entertain an animal-based diet and a carnivore diet, and then God forbid when they try it, that's it. All bets are off, because they're going to tell 10 friends and they're going to tell 10 friends, and it's just going to be a matter of time. And let me just say something about settled science. I think that nutrition for humans, for just regular folks, right? It should be settled science by this point. It should be settled, because here's why I say that. There's nothing new to discover. Now, when it comes, if you've got a very rare genetic inborn error of metabolism, or you've got a very rare nutrition processing defect or something, well, we need experts for that kind of stuff. But just to feed the 99%, just the regular folks out there, that should be settled science. And I think within 5 to 10 years, it will be settled science that if somebody says to you, oh, you shouldn't eat any red meat, they'll just be laughed out of the cocktail party. They'll be like, you're foolish. What are you talking about? If you want to believe that as a religion, if you eat vegan for ethical or moral reasons, fine, that's fine. You know, many people have sacrificed themselves, their bodies even, to an irrational religious belief. That's happened millions of times through the centuries. But don't pretend it's the healthiest diet. No, you don't get to say that. That's foolishness. And I think that nutrition will quickly move towards being a settled science. If you want your best health, you eat an animal-based diet. You eat lots of red meat, lots of egg yolks, lots of seafood. If you want some veg, that's fine. Eat that. I think a lot of people can tolerate it just fine. But you won't even, in 5 to 10 years from now, you won't be able to say red meat's inflammatory. I think people will laugh at you if you say that. You won't be able to say saturated animal fat is bad for you. I think you'll just be laughed at. Like, that's foolishness, dude. Just like if somebody came out and said, hey, you shouldn't breathe clean air. That's so old school. That just because our ancestors did it, that doesn't mean anything. That's just an appeal to nature to say that we've breathed air for millions of years, therefore we should breathe air into the future. We've got this new pressurized canister. We want you to start breathing this. Our research in our lab that we funded and paid for shows that breathing this canned stuff is better for you than breathing natural air. Well, how would that go at the cocktail party? People would be like, what the hell? You need to put down the drink and not have any more. But that's literally when you say, oh, you shouldn't eat fatty red meat, you're saying the equivalent of, oh, you shouldn't breathe air. You should breathe this stuff that we make in the chemical factory. Or saying, oh, you shouldn't drink clean water. That's so old school. That's an appeal to nature. We've got this new hydration stuff. Gatorade, for example, it's much better for hydration than water. And, and they've spent enough millions of dollars that there are people out there who would say, oh, if you're in the gym and really sweating, you don't want to just drink water. You want to add something to your water. Really? Because you know what? I think our ancestors were pretty aggressively athletic in many, many areas, and they just drank water when they were thirsty. And they only drank water if they were thirsty. They didn't walk around with their 1 gallon water jug and try to drink 180 ounces of water or whatever the hell they're recommending these days. They just drank water when they were thirsty. They breathed air when they felt like they needed to. And when they got hungry, they ate lots of fatty red meat. And I think you'll see over the next 5 to 10 years, that'll just become known. Just like breathing air. There's no argument. You should breathe air. There's no argument. You should drink water. And there's no argument. You should eat fatty red meat. Yes. I think that's going to happen.
Do you think we got to where we are now from I love conspiracy theories, right? So everybody calls it conspiracy theory, even though you could verify information.
Right.
Do you think we got where we are now because it kind of started conspiracy, right? Like you can go look up Harvard pain or Harvard scientists being paid by sugar companies.
Yeah.
Do you think we got here from that and it's still rampant? Or do you think we kind of thought we knew what we were doing? We were trying to do the best we could. And then when we realized it might not be 100%, it was just easier to keep going with what we're going and not introduce all of this nuance.
I think it was all that. First of all, if somebody doesn't truly understand human nutrition, there is a lot of nuance and there's a lot of discussion that has to take place. Unlike every other mammal on planet Earth that just when they get hungry, they go eat species appropriate food and then go take a nap or go play. Humans, we overthink things. And so I think really it's a combination of factors. One is the slippery slope of tiny sins. And so what I mean by that, just like Dr. Fred Stair at Harvard, right? I don't think he truly believed in his heart of hearts that sugar was a health food. But I think that they offered to fund his lab and maybe he got a little envelope too. And he's like, well, I mean, it's not like I'm recommending cocaine. It's just sugar. I mean, we've been eating sugar forever. And so it was just a little sin. It wasn't a huge sin. And then this is over and over. Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys, it's documented that he had bacon and eggs for breakfast every morning. Right? This is known. There are people who were around him who documented this in their diary and other stuff in primary sources. It's not me making this up. He didn't believe that animal fat was going to kill you. But he thought, I believe, I think that this will probably be a little better. And plus, I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm going to be the guy. And it's not like I'm telling people to eat mercury. It's not like it's going to acutely kill people. It's just a little sin. It's not a big deal. And so all these little sins added up over the decades to the point where everybody's thoroughly confused. Because just imagine all of the young PhD students who were in their first year when the Harvard professor took the sugar money. They heard him. They didn't have any clue about nutrition. They were learning from him. And so by the time they got out, then it was accepted, it's animal fat. Sugar's not the culprit. It's saturated fat. And they believed that in their heart of hearts, JT. Right? It wasn't, not only had they learned it intellectually, they believed it. And now those are two different things. Because you're not going to fight for a factoid, but you'll fight for something you believe in, right? And it got so bad, the slippery slope of tiny lies, that it made room for people like Dr. Michael Greger and Dr. Paul Bernard, who could say things like, you can eat all the sugar you want. Sugar's from a plant. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Just eat only plants and you'll be fine. It got to so many little lies added up over the decades that now it's currently acceptable, but I predict it won't be for much longer, to say things like that from MDs and PhDs. And they can make a career on saying that kind of stuff and make a good living, being an academic professor, or, in Bernard's case, or being a YouTuber in Greger's case. But I just don't think that's going to continue because I think, and it's due in large part to social media. It's basically the campfire that the entire world sits around every evening. That's what social media is. If you think about us as a tribal species. And you've got too many people like me and you and Chafee and Baker and Kiltz and all these guys who not only can tell you what carnivore did for them, but can show you a before picture. And you've got millions of people at this point all around the world, even in places like India and other countries in Asia where it's frowned upon to eat meat. It's considered sinful. Also, that's part of the problem, too, that meat's always kind of been associated with sin. And so then you sound more moral if you talk about eating plants. And their entire religion's based on that, right? But even in countries where it's considered sort of sinful, if not, unethical to eat meat, here's people on social media sitting around this global campfire saying, hey, I used to be fat and had type 2 diabetes and fatty liver and sleep apnea. But now when I started eating nothing but meat and eggs, all that stuff went away. And if it were just an occasional kook saying that, it would come and go like any other fad. But it's not. It's not the occasional kook. It's people you know. It's people who live on your street. It's people you go to work with every day. It's people you see every day of your life. And you know how unhealthy and miserable they used to be. You know it personally. And now you see how happy they are and how healthy they are and how active they are. That you can't kill that kind of message. But social media is what's allowed it to grow so quickly. Whereas, back when Dr. Robert Atkins was talking about this stuff, he had to write a book, he had to go on television shows, he had to get past all the gatekeepers to get that message out. And now, social media, the greatest experiment and also the worst experiment that humanity has ever performed on itself. A lot of good things are going to come out of that. And I think one of them is it's going to definitively show, without doubt, that an animal-based diet is the healthiest diet for a human being to eat, whether it's all animals or whether it's just animal-based, mostly animal products. I think that's just going to become self-evident to most people.
And I can personally attest to that. I had a random guy at my wife's work, like, pop out. I've met him before, but he pops out and be like, "Hey, I watch all your stuff and it makes sense to me." I was like, "Oh, okay." Like,
Yep. Yep.
A lot more than just, "Hey, I saw you on social media." It's like people I know in real life that I didn't even know knew I was on social media. And they're like, "Hey, yeah, I started doing it and like, it's working great." So I definitely think that is what's driving it. So now I have to ask the question. So we're in World Carnivore Month, and the number one question I get asked is cholesterol. Like, it is so much, and I should respond a little better, but because everybody's asking the question for the first time, even though I've been asked it 8,000 times, right? Like,
right.
I started responding to people like, "What's your cholesterol?" I'm C27 H46O. People will be like, "What?" I'm like, "That's the cholesterol molecule." And that is literally the only thing people can harp on, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How does a person that's first starting, right? Because this, like, World Carnivore Month is getting huge. I remember 2 years ago, I didn't even know it was a thing. And then last year, it started getting big. And now it's like, it's this big thing that a lot of people are noticing.
Yeah.
How does somebody talk about that? Because that's the first thing. I had a PA of dermatology, physician's assistant in dermatology, try to talk to me about getting on a statin. And I'm like, if I was going to get on a statin, you're not the one I would go to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what everybody who studies this, like you and I and other doctors and PhDs, is that the entire cholesterol hypothesis was generated during the time period that I was describing earlier. It was for this hypothesis that eating cholesterol is bad for you. That was the first. And then having high cholesterol is bad for you. That came later. That hypothesis formed in a society of bread eaters, right? Who were eating plenty of carbs, and they were having plenty of meat back then. But that in most cases that was not the majority of their diet. They were not on a carnivore diet. So Ansel Keys was coming along with his research. The Harvard School of Public Health was going, eat your carbs, not your fat. It was becoming very popular. And then we were discovering how to check these lab tests. And total cholesterol was one of the very first ones we could check. And so anytime we can check a test and get a black and white number, it's human nature to want to do something about that number. So the first thing we're going to say is, okay, what's the normal range for this number? And then, what are we going to do if it's high? Well, if enough doctors are saying, if this number's high, that increases your risk of fill in the blank, then there's going to be a pharmaceutical company who's going to say, you know what? We've got this drug. It lowers that number. It'll lower that number X back down to the normal range. And doctors are saying that this number, if it's high, it'll kill you. But we got a pill that'll lower it. And if you I'm sure you've looked into the early research on statins, on the reductase inhibitors. It was awful. The first one they came up with just was kill people left and right. And so they kept refining it. And finally, they're like, oh, it lowers cholesterol, and now it doesn't kill people outright again. Still a long list of side effects, still a long list of potential bad things down the road, but it doesn't kill you quickly anymore. So now all the attorneys are happy. We're not going to get sued out of existence. And so the entire hypothesis that eating cholesterol is bad for you, or that having high cholesterol is bad for you, is still a hypothesis. Even plant-based cardiologists won't even try to pretend it's a theory, like it's achieved the next level. We've got so many hundreds of studies that just show conclusively that high cholesterol absolutely is harmful, that we still don't have that research to this day, even though many doctors falsely believe that we do. And I think that my videos, your videos, the video interviews I've done with people like Professor Ben Bikman, Professor David Diamond, and many, many other professors whose full-time job, and then also let's not forget Nick Norwitz. He's never held a professor position, but he could if he wanted to in nutrition and cell molecular biology. These guys will tell you, yeah, it's way more nuanced than that. There we are, back to that nuance again. Like, there might be a small subpopulation where you need to do something about this number, this total cholesterol number, but in the vast majority of people, it's irrelevant to their overall health. And so anytime that happens, the people that don't want you to eat meat will then come up with a new number. So then it was LDL cholesterol. And quickly that's fallen by the wayside. And then for a minute, it was TMAO. Oh, my God, eating meat raises your TMAO levels. And then that fell by the wayside. And now the latest boogaboos are ApoB and Lp(a). These are the latest. And I still consider these numbers to be experimental. I'm not in any way convinced that they're going to turn out to be black and white, glow in the dark, flashing red stoplights that, oh, my God, you've got to do something about this number. Just like total cholesterol. Any doctor who says, oh, your total cholesterol is high, we're going to have to put you on medicine for that, they're 15 years behind on reading the literature. Nobody who knows anything talks about total cholesterol anymore. And it's quickly becoming that way about LDL cholesterol. And it's already become that way about TMAO. Nobody talks about that anymore except for Joel Kahn, a plant-based cardiologist on X. He tries to talk about it a little bit, but nobody pays any attention to TMAO anymore. I predict that'll happen to ApoB. I predict within 3 to 5 years, nobody will talk about what's your ApoB. Oh my God, you got to get on this. We got to lower your LDL cholesterol and your ApoB. We got to lower it down to 30, or you're just going to die any minute of a heart attack. Well, you just keep seeing these things thrown up. Oh my God. And then 2, 3, 4 years later, nobody talks about that anymore. I think people are smart enough to see a pattern. It's like, oh, okay, so you guys keep throwing up these things. Another reason I've got to take a statin or Repatha or Praluent or whatever the next pharmaceutical you guys are going to invent and get a FDA approval for, got to take that. Oh my God. But then a few years later, you're not even talking about that number anymore, talking about a different number. And people they see that. People are not stupid, especially with this global campfire we all get to sit around. We can sit around and chat with Joe Rogan and all the intelligent guests he has. We get to sit around your campfire, my campfire, all these campfires. And anytime everybody in a tribe sits around a campfire, the reason we discuss stuff around the campfire every evening is to weed out the bullshit. That's why we do that. That's a protected evolutionary strategy. And so now that we have this global campfire, we can sit at your campfire for a while, then go to this one for a while. Look, where are the obese people? Where are the people with type 2 diabetes? Where are the people getting amputations? Where are the people who have to go on dialysis? Whose campfire are they sitting around? Well, it turns out it's the American Diabetes Association. That's the campfire they've been sitting around. So people are quickly going, oh, maybe I need to ignore their advice. I need to look for other advice. And that's the beauty of having social media is we get to try these different things on for size. Oh, vegan. Okay, I'll try that. Well, 2 years later, now I've got all these chronic conditions and I have no energy. Well, that didn't work. Not only am I going to stop sitting at the vegan campfire, I'm going to start my own campfire and start telling people what the vegan diet did to me. And indeed, you see a ton of YouTube channels of people who used to be vegans and now are carnivores or eating keto. But I don't see a lot of campfires, YouTube channels, of previous carnivores who are now vegan. And that would be a very strong signal, wouldn't it? That if there's thousands of people that used to eat this way, and now they not only do they not eat that way, they went to the trouble of starting a YouTube channel to try to warn other people about that way of eating. I feel like that's a very strong signal that you should listen to and not blindly believe, of course, but at least go, that's weird. That's the fourth previous vegan today that I've seen now has a YouTube channel saying eat meat. That's weird. That's a big signal coming out of the vegan community.
The number of people is unbelievable.
It is. It is.
All you have to do is look, and you'll see that. So I actually learned an interesting thing. I was talking to Dr. Ovadia earlier this week, and when you say like the science on cholesterol is stuck, 15, 20 years ago, he told me that when he was finishing up his medical school back in the early 2000s, and he was drawn towards cardiac surgery, and he's like, I want to be a cardiac surgeon. And he told me, and I don't think I will ever forget this till the day I die, that his mentor said, don't do that, dude. That's a dead field. We have statins. Statins are going to solve heart disease. You are going to pick a field that nobody's going to need you for anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, what? Like 20 years ago, people think that we have heart disease figured out? That's mind blowing to me.
Yep. And that's that arrogant ignorance. And so a lot of this is human nature stuff, JT, and a lot of this is paradigmatic belief. And it quickly gets into psychology and sociology and other studies that have nothing to do with nutrition. But let's just jump into that it was probably an MD, if not an MD, PhD. Dr. Ovadia's professor who told him that, his mentor. He's like, what's wrong with you, dude? 20 years from now, nobody's going to have heart disease because we got all these cholesterol-lowering drugs now. Did he believe that, or was he trying to trick Dr. Ovadia? He believed that with his heart of hearts. If you'd have pushed him on it, he might have come to blows with you over that. He's like, no, I'm telling you, I'm one of the leaders in this field. Heart surgeries are dying. That's not going to be a thing except for, like congenital defects and stuff like that. Nobody's going to be having bypass surgery and having heart attacks because of high cholesterol. That's not going to happen. And so it calls into question the entire hypothesis, doesn't it? Maybe it's not the high cholesterol because we damn sure been prescribing some statins and worse, Repatha and Praluent, the PCSK9 inhibitors, which I predict win very badly with class action lawsuits. I hope nobody watching this is on one of those. If you are, maybe do some reading and get off that. But that entire paradigm is crumbling. That way of believing is crumbling. But there's still doctors out there who, if your total cholesterol is 300, they literally become physically upset, emotionally upset. And for anybody watching, anytime your doctor or your dietitian or your mechanic or your grocery sacker becomes emotionally upset, if you tell the grocery sacker, I want paper, not plastic, he shouldn't care. He should be like, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. If you're a mechanic, if you're like, yeah, I don't want that brand of motor oil, I want this brand. Only if there's a financial incentive for your mechanic is he going to get emotionally upset with you because you didn't want Haviland, you wanted Texaco, whatever, right? He shouldn't care. He's like, I don't care. I've got them both, whatever. If your doctor becomes emotionally upset with you because your cholesterol's high and you won't take a statin, that's a huge red flag that your doctor's not using the front of his or her brain They're using the animal, the reptilian part of our brain, the old part of our brain that's based on emotional and irrational belief. They're not using logic if they become emotionally upset with you because you won't take Repatha, or you won't worry about your ApoB, or you won't worry about this, that, or the other. I've had clients who have told me the following story. Now, listen to this, JT. You've probably seen my YouTube video, How Not to Have a Heart Attack. You probably know what the biggest risk factors for actually having a heart attack are. I've had people who have completely reversed their type 2 diabetes, stopped 3 or 4 different medicines. Their A1C is 5.3 now. They've completely reversed and gotten rid of their fatty liver. They've completely lowered their metabolic syndrome-induced hypertension, which is what 90% of high blood pressure is. It's just hyperinsulinemia. They've reversed it, stopped 2 blood pressure medicines. Their blood pressure is now 120/70. They used to be obese. Now they have a normal weight, normal BMI, normal body fat percentage. And they used to smoke, and they've stopped smoking. Okay? Now, for those of you who don't know, I just listed all of the actual major risk factors for having a heart attack. They have reversed the top 5 things that will give you a heart attack the quickest. Those are the top 5. They've reversed all of them. But their doctor said, oh, your LDL's high. We got to get you on a statin. And they're like, but they've seen my video, and they're like, well, I've already reversed all the biggest causes of heart attack. And if you ask your doctor, where does high LDL, where does it fall on the top 10? Oh, it doesn't. It's number 14, right? It's number 13 or 14. High LDL, that's way down the list. No, why? And so why is your doctor getting emotionally upset with you because you're not overly concerned about the 13th potential cause of heart disease, heart attack, when you've already reversed the top 5 or 6? Like you're rolling 7s all day long if you're at the crap table, if you're this person, but they're worried about your high LDL. It just doesn't make any sense. Your doctor should be high-fiving you and giving you a bro hug because you reversed your type 2 diabetes, because that's the biggest risk factor for having a heart attack. They literally should kiss you on the mouth if you reverse type 2 diabetes, stopped smoking, and got your blood pressure back to normal and lowered your blood pressure back to normal, all with diet. They should literally give you a mouth kiss and hug you and ask you if they can adopt you as their child. Literally. But they're going to yell at you because your LDL's high? What? I think people are quickly seeing that that's the law. If your doctor gets emotionally upset with you because you don't want to eat a plant-based diet, that's weird. That's not a leading authority. Can you imagine Nick Norwich getting emotionally upset with you if you said, no, I believe a plant-based diet is the best diet? You think Nick Norwich, soon to be MD, would he get mad at you and kick you out and fire you as a patient? He'd be like, no, fine. Please take all the following supplements if you're going to do that. And please try to eat lots of avocados because your brain needs a lot of fat. But go ahead and give it a try. Let me know how it goes. I'm here if you need me. That's how a good doctor acts. I'm here if you need me. Huzzah for reversing your type 2 diabetes, the leading cause of heart attack. If you don't want to take a statin or a PCSK9 inhibitor, that's fine. I'll be here if you need me, but I'm not going to get mad at you about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And for anybody who, I realized LDL was crumbling when I realized how easily I can manipulate it.
Right.
And this is something Norwich has done with his Oreo-verse-statin. I got blood work after doing an overeating experiment on carnivore, and then got blood work doing an overeating experiment on standard American diet, where I was eating 500 grams of the worst possible carbs you can imagine. And my LDL went down 70%. And I was like, so the problem is I go into a doctor with 2 tests and they would go, absolutely do not do that one. Keep doing this one. And I'm like, you cannot convince me that that's the way it is, right? Like it is just so absurd that, like you said, we look at these numbers that don't indicate anything else We don't ask about diet. We don't ask about lifestyle. We don't, all of these other factors. And that's what I brought up as well is, okay, let's look at all of the risk factors for heart disease.
Yeah.
If every single one of them gets better, but my LDL stays high, I'm taking that trade-off.
Yeah. And that's why I'm such a big fan of the experiments that Dr. Norwitz is doing, but also that he's blasting them on social media. Because here's a fun doctor fact for you. Most people know that you can change your blood sugar level pretty rapidly. They know that if you fast, it's going to go down. And if you eat a candy bar, it's probably going to go up. Even the grocery sacker boy, he knows that. He can tell you that. But if you ask the average person, what about your LDL? Do you think that's pretty much set in stone? Does it change constantly? Can you make a meaningful difference in your LDL with your diet? Most people are like, I don't think so. I think you either have to take medicine for that or whatever. Here's the fun doctor fact for you. If you ask the average primary care doctor, family physician, internal medicine doctor, pediatrician, if you say a high LDL, can people really affect that much with their diet? What percentage of doctors do you think would answer, nah, I don't think you can really do much with it with diet. You need to be on a pharmaceutical for that. It's 80%. It's a huge percentage. They have no idea that Nick Norwitz can double his LDL in 7 days, or he can cut it by 50% in 7 days. And before Nick was doing it, Dave Feldman was doing it. He's a lean mass hyperresponder. That's where that came from. And he had
Did you see his latest one?
Diet. I haven't seen his latest one yet. That's on my
just
watch
came
list.
out. He doubled his LDL going vegan.
Exactly. Right. And so when he was eating a ketogenic diet, his LDL went sky high. And so he's like, So he just did 7 days of eating white bread and fat-free turkey and cut it in half in 7 days. And it's actually called the Feldman Protocol. People use it if they're going to get dinged on their health insurance because their LDL's too high. They'll just eat the Feldman Protocol for 7 days before they get their labs checked. And voila, like magic, their LDL's cut in half. But the average doctor, and that's what's so important for people watching this to understand, your doctor does not believe that's possible because they haven't seen Norwitz's or Feldman's videos. They think that your LDL is pretty much set in stone. They'll tell you to eat plant-based or stop eating bacon, but they don't really believe in their heart that that's going to fix it. They believe in their heart that you're going to have to take Zocor, Lipitor, Crestor, or Repatha or Praluent. That's the only way you're going to meaningfully move your LDL cholesterol. They believe that irrationally. It's not based on any facts that they know. They just believe that. They know that you can adjust your blood sugar up or down very quickly, but they have no idea you can do the same thing to your LDL cholesterol. And I think that's yet another nail in the coffin of the heart health, the lipid heart, the cholesterol heart hypothesis. You're gonna shoot that hypothesis right between the eyes with the research that Nick Norwitz and Dave Feldman and others are doing. Because if you can go vegan and double your LDL because you did a particular, I haven't seen his video, but I think I know what he did. You can double your LDL on a vegan diet? What? What the hell? How's that? I thought plants were magically good. How is that even possible? And so when you start doing stuff like that, what it's going to do is it's going to educate a lot of people who watch the videos. But here's what it's the true power of it is it's going to make plant-based doctors who believe in plant-based diets and believe in vegan diets, it's going to make them shut the hell up in public. They're no longer going to spout that plant-based bullshit at the cocktail party or around the campfire, aka online. They're gonna quickly, I predict, and we'll see if I'm right about this with my prognostication abilities. All the plant-based doctors and gurus out there, it's going to become 100% about ethics and morality. They're going to stop talking about any health benefits. If you're an evil person if you kill and eat animals, that's what and then it's going to fall by the wayside. Because if there's no benefit for me, if all you're going to say is accuse me of being evil or unethical or immoral, then screw you, buddy. I'm going to eat what helps my health. But you'll see a dash for the doors. All the plant-based doctors will stop saying that a plant-based diet is the best diet for human health, because they know their paradigm is literally crumbling before their eyes.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the last thing in closing before we run this for 6 hours, to anybody's listening who's still on the fence about starting carnivore, what are a couple quick tips? I know you have a ton of information on this, but a couple quick hit elevator pitch to people on how to at least get started going carnivore.
Yeah. I've got 5 steps. Number 1, get rid of all sugar from your diet. Added sugar, definitely, and then most of the naturally occurring sugar as well. You don't need it. Number 2, get rid of all the grains and beans. Wheat, rice, oats, corn, soybean, millet, amaranth, quinoa, all of it. None of it, those are starvation foods. Those are not health foods. They'll keep you from starving. It's okay to have rice and beans in your basement in case the apocalypse comes. So they'll keep you from starving. But they are not health optimization foods. Step number 3, get rid of all the vegetable seed oils. Canola, soybean, safflower, sunflower, peanut, corn, vegetable shortening. None of that shit's good for you, okay? No human ate that 100 years ago. We have no ancestral ability to know what that is. Step 4, cover at least half of your plate with fatty red meat and eggs with the yolk. Doesn't have to be all your plate to make me proud of you. At least half of your plate. That's effectively keto, right? And step number 5, don't snack between meals, even if it's with meat or eggs. Don't eat until you're comfortably stuffed during your meal. Eat 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day. I care not. Don't snack between meals. If you'll do those 5 things, your health is going to abruptly start to improve. And it won't take a year or 2 for it to start to improve. You will be able to notice within days, oh, I feel better. Oh, my thinking's clearer. Oh, I've lost 2 pounds. Oh, my blood pressure looks better. Oh, my blood sugar looks better. Oh, I don't need this medicine anymore. Like, that stuff will start to happen within days to weeks. Now, some things definitely take longer. They take months or years to heal, depending on what they are. But you're going to notice immediate improvement over and above any other dietary thing you've ever tried. And it's easy to get started. And I don't want anybody to wait for a particular month or a particular day. Oh, I'm going to start on my birthday. Why? You can start your very next meal to eat a proper human diet. And you're going to start to benefit from that immediately. Immediately, your body will start to heal, because the human body's default state is good health. Only to the degree to which you slowly poison it with the food sold in the supermarket will you experience bad health. As soon as you start to eliminate the slow poisons, you'll start to heal, because that's what your body wants to do. Stop the alcohol, stop the drugs, stop the junk food, and your body will start to heal immediately. It's really is that simple, and that's why I think in the near future it'll just be settled science what the human diet should be.
100%. Well, sir, I really, really appreciate you coming on. I know all of the listeners love when we're able to get doctors, professionals, because that's, even if we feel like we've seen the light, it's still ingrained to us to,
sure.
Well, are you a doctor? Or what does a doctor say? So I really appreciate it, sir. To everybody who has tuned in, thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.